So, all right. Hey, Wendy.
Hey, Tia, how are you?
Good. How are you, Sabrina?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, well, we just started, so here we go. I am going to share my screen, and you should be able to see the website for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Is everybody okay?
It's there.
All right. So Amparo was a national initiative by the ELCA at around the time when there was a lot of unaccompanied migrant minors, kids coming into the country, coming across the border. And so there's an Amparo office at the ELCA headquarters. And one of the initiatives that they did, along with one of the synods in California, was to put together a welcoming congregations network. And this is not, by the way, the Reconciling in Christ program. The Reconciling in Christ program has sometimes been called a welcoming movement for GLBT people. This is solely with regards to immigrants. This is a sample letter that is on the ELCA website that tells what a congregation should do or what commitments a congregation would make if they became a welcoming congregation. And let me back up for a second. Tonight's presentation will consist of basically two different topics. One, the ELCA initiative by Amparo to encourage congregations to become welcoming congregations. That's the first thing, and that's the more simple thing. Actually, it's not that involved. The second thing is the Minnesota Sanctuary State Coalition. I've been going to those meetings and have joined in some of the advocacy actions. And so we'll talk about these two, I don't know, proposals. I don't know if you want to call them proposals, but two different topics that I am very, very interested in. By way of introduction of myself, I forgot my own introduction. I should say that I have become, because of opportunities that I had years ago to travel in Mexico and actually to lead courses. I was teaching religion at Augsburg College, and I led students to Cuernavaca, Mexico, to study Latin American history and liberation theology. And so I did that a total of 5 times in Mexico. And those experiences in Mexico changed my life forever. And it's only recently that I've become more active in the immigration movement. And those seeds that were planted a long time ago are now sort of coming to fruition, maybe, I guess. So let's go back to where I was when I found myself here. So this is the Amparo website, the ELCA website, and this is what the ELCA is putting forward as a possibility for Lutheran congregations to do. If we were to become a welcoming congregation, we would make 4 different commitments. First of all, we would welcome and minister to migrants and identify a contact person in the congregation who has language skills necessary for basic communication. I'm just going to read through all 4 of them, and then we can talk a little bit about them. We would physically accompany migrants as they make new lives in local communities. We would pray for justice for migrants, and we would advocate for public policy that would positively impact the current immigration crisis, including working in partnership with the ELCA Washington office and Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service on immigration reform. So those, I'm going to give you my opinion. Not only do those seem relatively easy, but it seems like we're already doing it. We have already done those things. Nancy was mentioning before we started that some years back, Grace sponsored or worked with an Iraqi family. Ingrid is right with us here tonight as a member of the Kubisa family. And we were able to walk with the Kubisa family as they came to Minnesota, and we're able to, accompany them. The thing that I think we do less of is the advocacy for public policy. But in all honesty, my second piece of the session tonight is about advocacy. So it's possible that we would simply, take a look at different ideas for advocacy as well. Let me stop and see if anybody has any comments or questions about this, because this is, in my mind, it's relatively simple. I mean, the ELCA is making it simple for congregations to do this. We will be invited to do more, obviously, but those four things are what a welcoming congregation is committed to do. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, how do you get, I mean, I know I was involved in helping the Iraqi family, but I don't know how we got connected to them, how they got assigned to us, or how we came to sponsor them.
I don't know that.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that happened. So
I didn't even know that bit of history. It's before our time period there.
It is. Yeah, it was a while ago.
yeah.
Sometimes there are connections that come through Lutheran social service.
It could have been.
Sometimes it has been with the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service.
Mhm.
And there's another organization in the cities that's kind of geared up quickly to try to help with Afghani immigrants coming here after the events of this summer.
Right.
That's Arrive Ministries. And there's been a little concern raised as we've talked about it, because Arrive seems to be rather focused on Christian proselytizing, and that isn't the approach of Amparo or our congregation's intent for getting involved either.
Mhm.
Right. There has been, a voice or two raised about, working with an Afghani family. And so that's, that's, if, we'll see if there's any energy around that. I'm pretty committed to the whole piece about our southern border and the Central America piece, but yeah. Okay, so the rest of this letter is more just nuts and bolts of what you do if you join the Amparo Network. I have mentioned this to Stan Olson, and so we'll see if there's any other interest in moving forward with this.
I think the process is super simple to become a welcoming congregation. We've got several congregations in our synod here in Southeast Michigan who have identified ourselves as welcoming through the Amparo process. It's very simple.
Yeah, it is really simple.
And if you're interested for the Iraqi or Afghani refugees, LIRS is working really hard right now on they're being ready to accept the refugees and trying to connect them to kind of like foster families.
Yeah. The president of our church mentioned that too, that LIRS is a really good thing. We're not in vicinity of an LIRS site, so it's harder, but we have LSS. And so that's a possibility too. But well, you know what, if we have energy around it, we'll explore and look into different, possibilities. This is just a really quick list. Of course, the usual suspects in the Twin Cities are already welcoming congregations. So Edina Community Lutheran, Holy Trinity is another, Christ on Capitol Hill, Lutheran Church of the Redeemer with Jim Erlinson, Lutheran Church of Christ the Redeemer, Gloria Day, Hope, St. Paul Reformation. And then there are some ones in the suburbs, and then one in Northfield, one in Rochester, and one in Sioux Falls. So, and one in Wilmer. So there's a total of 18 congregations that have declared themselves as welcoming congregations. All right, I am going to hold us to an hour-long time frame tonight, so I want to turn us to the next piece. Let's see if I can get my thing out of the way here so I can read this.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
And welcome.
Thank you. I'm wondering about what unit is handling this for the ELCA, and is there a specific budget allocation, and how much have they allocated for this work?
I do not know. Is that Emily Eastwood?
That is Emily Eastwood, under
Hello,
the
Emily.
guise of Jan Bailey on my label.
Okay, all right. Emily, I do not know. The thing I do know is that there is an executive director of Amparo who has an office at the ELCA headquarters. So I know that she's a paid staff person. I do not know any budget, I don't know any of those numbers. So I wish I did.
And how is Amparo funded?
I am assuming simply through the ELCA. I'm not sure.
Okay, and are there any budgetary implications for Grace in becoming a welcoming congregation? Are there dues that need to be paid, or?
No, nope. It's a contract of a spiritual contract of sorts. I don't think it's like a membership. I think it's a declaration of intent and willingness to work on these four things.
And if I may,
Yeah.
I'm thinking in the way that Grace Community responded to the needs of Kubisa family getting here and other things, that those funds, Emily, would be raised when we know what the needs are and raised within our congregation. So no budget beyond that.
Right. Might want to think about that when we go into the next budget cycle.
Mhm.
Just if this team gets up and running as under the advocacy arm, we would want to allocate some funds, like for travel, if you need to go to the ELCA for a meeting, for example, to help fund that. I mean, I would like to talk to this Mary Campbell. Is that the person?
Yep.
Yep.
And just see what they have in mind. If we're talking advocacy, are we talking advocacy only on the congregational level within our community, or are we talking about church-wide advocacy?
What we're doing is the next piece is we're going to talk about one possible piece of advocacy.
Okay.
Yep. So this is my little thing that I'm interested in doing and bringing to Grace as a possible advocacy project.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that first, and then we can think of other things if other things come up.
I think by being a welcoming congregation on that list, then if they have a need to connect a recent migrant to someone who can drive them to appointments or whatever, that's their starting point. They're going to look at that list and be like, okay, we have someone in this area, let's contact Grace Lutheran or whatever. And that's why you have to have that. Basically, you have to have a one contact point in your congregation who's willing to take the call.
Right. Okay, I am going to turn us to the second segment of tonight's presentation. And this is a coalition of mostly religious groups. It's called Minnesota Sanctuary State Coalition. And basically there are two right up at this is the website. And what I want to do is I want to kind of go through the website, and not that I'm going to read it to you, but I'm going to kind of put it in my own words and tell you about it. I've been going to their meetings for about 6 to 8 months, and I love what they're doing. So we have basically a mission statement here. Mission statement is we believe that because of immigrant neighbors who live among us, whether the whole variety of legal, denotations of non-citizens, non-native born people here. The mission statement is they all have dignity and human rights, and we are working to make Minnesota a sanctuary state. And let's get a little bit into more about what this means. Most of the groups in the coalition are religious, but it is very interfaith, not just all Christian, it's some non-Christian as well. So this is kind of another way of a second mission statement, kind of a purpose statement, if you will. It says that we believe that all members of our community should have dignity and respect, and that families are stronger because of diversity in our community. And the values that we hold is that immigration policies should work with immigrants to put forward these values of dignity, respect, compassion. At the bottom of this, it talks about criminalization. There's another place on the website that talks about criminalization of immigrants more, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. So again, this is what the Minnesota Sanctuary State Coalition is. It actually came out of the Episcopal Church. There was a group of Episcopalians who got together, and they were really upset that the Whipple building, which is the detention center at Fort Snelling, which houses people basically in a cruel and inhuman way, was named for one of the first bishops, Episcopalian bishops in Minnesota, and they were trying to make a way to change the name of that. And then they sort of expanded their mission. And so now there's quite a few different religious groups. So what does it mean? Okay, so the purpose of the Minnesota Sanctuary State Coalition is to help Minnesota become a sanctuary state. A lot of people might say, wait a second. Minneapolis and St. Paul have declared themselves sanctuary cities. Why would Minnesota need to be a sanctuary state? The reason is that even though there's been on paper and historically, there's been a declaration of the Twin Cities being sanctuary cities, the actual policies, the actual actions that are taken do not follow the ideas behind the sanctuary movement. In other words, the police in the Twin Cities are still working with federal agents. So let's look on this list and see exactly what it would mean if Minnesota would become a sanctuary state. First of all, it means that the state of Minnesota would not be obligated to enforce federal laws, federal immigration laws, namely ICE, right? Namely the federal immigration statutes. And places all over the country are doing this. There are 4 sanctuary states already: Illinois, California, Washington State, and New York. Minnesota would be the 5th if we did this. So let's keep going. Not only what police do on the street, but what police do in terms of the computer, right? You can be a police officer sharing names and information of people just through the computer. And so it includes the idea that Minnesota would not have to share data with federal agents as well. It would mean that immigrant residents would be, the hope is that people would be more willing to cooperate with local police if they knew that they were not going to be arrested for being undocumented, so that the local law enforcement would actually be strengthened in its ability to do its job to address criminal activity. Being a sanctuary state does not mean that immigrants who commit crimes would be protected from law enforcement. In other words, it wouldn't protect immigrants who commit crimes for anything. But the idea is that it would free up more resources to actually address criminal activity instead of the undocumented people who are simply undocumented. I want you all to feel like you could stop me with comments or questions as we go along. And I also know that I want to give time at the end for discussion. So I'm going to keep us moving along, and just stop me if you have a comment or a question.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is the way things are right now in Minnesota, are your police outside of the Twin Cities obligated to cooperate because the state is not a sanctuary state, or is it optional? Cooperate with ICE and all that.
So in this website, there is a thing called the 287G thing, right? Do you know about that, Wendy?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay, the 287G is a law that says that that local police departments should or have to cooperate with federal police
Okay.
agencies. And I don't know if it's mandatory, but I know that it's common, right? I mean, I don't know that it's mandatory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm going to write that down and take it down and find out.
I thought because even in our two major cities that have declared themselves sanctuary cities, because we still are receiving federal grants, there's a push that the police here have to work hand in hand with ICE. So declaring ourselves sanctuary city and still receiving those monies from the federal government has put things at cross purposes for us.
Yeah. Well, what we have discussed on MSSC meetings is that, for example, the sheriff and Tim Walz, the governor, have both spoken publicly in favor of being places of sanctuary. However, in practice, the police departments still have been, I mean, there's all kinds of stories. You know, you can arrest somebody because of a DUI, and instead of turning them loose, that same night, holding them overnight until the ICE agents can get there, and nobody knows if you're cooperating with ICE or not, right? So there's so many ways that police can cooperate, and the scuttlebutt is that police in the Twin Cities are definitely still cooperating, even though we declared ourselves sanctuary cities. So it's not making any sense. Yeah.
Janelle, could you slide so that we can see a little farther down the page now and read more?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so why should we do this? We want to tell you why. We want to convince you and put forward an argument here. We think that immigrants are good for the entire community, and first of all, the economy, right? We all care so much about the economy. The economy is already reliant on immigrant labor, and so it's already a good thing. Let me get my dogs. I'll be right back. Okay. Number two is that we know that deportation is a horrible thing for everybody involved. It's a thing that ruins people's lives, ruins families. And I mean, if we care about the economy, it breaks up, the breadwinner relationship in a family, be it the mother or the father. It makes the working conditions unstable. And so we stand against deportation. It's just bad for the community here, and it's bad for the individuals involved. Another reason is because of racism and racial profiling. Like the racial profiling that goes with the African American community, the same thing goes for immigrants, people of color, Latinx people, and we want to stand against that kind of racism. And because Minnesota has a long history of being welcoming to immigrants. I'm thinking about the Somali community. Our city has historically been open to, we're called Little Mogadishu. So I used to work in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, and it's a really interesting neighborhood. So those are some of the whys behind becoming a sanctuary state. I'm going to keep moving us along here because we have some more stuff to go through. Okay. I don't want to name any names, but for 4 years, we had what we might call the criminalization of the immigrant from the top. And this is my opinion, and obviously put forward on the website too. Not only is criminalization, and I want to include the term illegal alien as a part of the whole system of criminalizing people who are not born here. Not only is the phrase illegal alien demeaning and cruel, but it's a complete misnomer. You can be deported if you don't have documents, but you will not be charged with the crime and won't have a criminal record based on getting deported because you don't have legal documents. So, there is no such thing as an illegal alien, and that it just has to go. It just has to go. And it's time to call the criminalization process what it was and what it still is. It's just clear from research that immigrants are less likely to commit crime than native-born citizens. Undocumented immigrants are less likely than documented immigrants. That's just intuitive sense, is that undocumented folks don't want to come into contact with the law, and so they're actually the group that commits the least amount of crimes. So calling immigrants rapists and murderers is just, in my view, just unconscionable. The thing about viewing immigrants as criminals is used to justify holding them in detention, is to keeping them locked up. I have to wonder if we do that really because the system is so backlogged and so horribly, in just a state of disarray, or if we do that as a deterrent for having more people come here. That's just a question in the back of my mind. But what we know is that in detention, and because of what I would call the detention industrial complex, right? It's not the military industrial complex, but the detention industrial complex, the monies come in for holding people in detention. And so there is this motivation to keep people in detention, and then terrible things happen in the detention centers. So I think this is where Amparo got started too. We all kind of remember that state of affairs when, we heard about kids being held in detention and, kids being separated from their parents and all the bad stuff that went along with that. Okay, so that's the whole piece of the problem with criminalization. Does anybody want to make any comments on that, or? All right.
It sure seems that what you presented is the case, that was kind of labeling as criminal just for having crossed the border. I hear that a lot in conversations, that people think that. So getting out the word that being on US soil without status is,
I'm not on. I'm unconnected.
oh my goodness, well here, take this one.
Hello. I just got kicked out.
I'll see if I can get that one right.
Okay.
You need to put other documents up?
Yeah, we'll need to get my the rest of my document up. So a church can literally sign on to becoming a member of the Minnesota State Sanctuary Coalition. I'm going to go back to my statement, my other computer. I'll be right back.
Hola, madrina.
You're silenced. You need to turn your
No.
sound on.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you. So, I was talking to somebody the other day. It's not like the Minnesota State Sanctuary Coalition needs churches to sign on. If there was one thing that I would prefer that Grace University Lutheran do, is that we would become a welcoming congregation. And that's seemingly more of a priority for me. Okay, so I am not a legal expert, and I certainly don't, well, let me just do this. Here are the laws. We have House File 1919, a
I
bunch
can't
of,
see your screen.
can't see it?
No, you have to share your screen again. If you're trying to show us something. And I know that when things started heating up at the border and our last president was in office, Grace put up a immigrants are welcome here, big sign that was on the side of the building for a long time. So I thought that we had taken some steps about being a welcoming community, but
So
I'll be happy if we take more.
here's what I know. I think it was about 4 years ago, right before Pastor Dan's heart surgery, there was a discussion, there was a meeting, and as a congregation, Grace decided not to become a sanctuary church, but there was talk about becoming a sanctuary supportive congregation.
And Janelle, I think that's different from what you're talking about in
Different.
terms of becoming a welcoming.
It
It's a
is
different thing.
It's a different
Because
thing.
in the university community, the churches were banding together to do some hosting in their buildings in the historical and church way of providing sanctuary to keep someone safe. And for the most part, I think ICE has not gone into church buildings.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
let,
but
let me
in order to
zip
be
it.
in order to be a sanctuary congregation, you have to have a facilities like a shower and a place for them to sleep. Like you literally have to, they have to be able to live there and not leave the building if necessary.
Exactly, exactly. And we have commitments to university students. And so the church decided against taking that step. But we can support, there's other churches in our area that have people living there. And if there's energy at Grace, we can be a supportive congregation. So, okay, so that's where that stands. Okay, I do not want to go through these bills by any means because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I do have here the House file 1919, and then the Senate file is also available, just very similar to this. What I want to do is go back and just do a summary of what all that legalese means, basically. And what it would mean is that Minnesota state and local government entities do not share information or collaborate with ICE or transfer an undocumented person into ICE custody without a judicial warrant. So it kind of cuts off ties, cuts off a working relationship with ICE in the community. Okay, so here's the thing that I was talking about before, the 287G agreements. There is a law somewhere that says that local police have to work with federal enforcement agencies. And so this would directly counteract that. And because there's all kinds of federal funding that, muddies the water. I mean, there's funding that comes through for detention centers. There's, funding from the feds that motivate local police departments to cooperate. So it works to counteract those. It would have Keith Ellison and his office create a process to address violations of this as they're happening. So that's what the legal process would entail. Well, that's what the legal goal of these two bills. That's what it looks like. This last piece here is simply bills that also apply to immigration that the Minnesota Sanctuary State Coalition has interest in. I'm thinking specifically about the driver's license bill, and Isaiah has worked on that quite a bit. And so the Minnesota Sanctuary State Coalition has not done as much with that. And, but that's a big one here. There's work being done on that as well. Okay, so in a nutshell, our statement proposes that if Minnesota is going to put forward values of compassion and justice and respect and dignity, then we want to have policies and practices that are consistent with our value system. And we will be urging the governor, Congress people to support these bills. And, we could do some advocacy work in our church to support the movement. We don't know, obviously we have an election coming up November 2nd. So that's, everybody is thinking about that. I think after the election, we don't know if there's going to be hearings. We don't know, how it's going to move forward, how it's going to be proposed. We know that the bills are written. And I think at this point, that's all we really know. Keith, name here at the bottom of the paragraph is David Hutchinson, who's the county sheriff. He has publicly supported the policies, and then it's clear that people are disappointed in his actions. So, yeah, so I think that's all we'll say about that for now. All right. That is the entirety of the website, and I kind of threw out a lot of different pieces of information. Wondering if there's any thoughts or comments.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I live in Presbyterian land. And do you know whether there are parallel things going forward within the Presbyterian Christendom doing similar things, or is it pretty much the Lutherans that are carrying the load?
I know that there are 60 interfaith churches in Minnesota who have declared themselves sanctuary churches. And so that's across all the denominations. So the sanctuary church movement is not just a Lutheran thing, like the welcoming church thing. And I know that there are churches who, if they don't want to actually house somebody, in their church building, then they can declare themselves a sanctuary supporting congregation. And so that's open to any church. To answer your question specifically, I don't know what the Presbyterians are up to, but the Presbyterians, the guy in Tucson that got arrested for handing out water. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
He was in the desert and he went out and he gave out water, and it was against the law, and he got arrested. He was a Presbyterian. I believe he was a Presbyterian pastor. So I know there's stuff going on in the Presbyterian church. I just don't know much about it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I'm sure that Amparo would welcome, maybe Amparo would welcome Presbyterian churches. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Could test it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it would seem, Jerry, that this Minnesota, Janelle, what's the name of it? Sanctuary Coalition?
Sanctuary State Coalition.
Yeah. That group would welcome the Presbyterian Church in, and there may be things going inside the Presbytery
Right.
here in Minnesota. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, I don't see any Presbyterian presence on this list. I see Unitarians. I see Catholics and the, Jewish synagogue, Muslim American Society. So that's, what? The Presbyterian Church is your mission field.
Jerry, you need to jump on that.
Right. Good idea. Well, I think there would be a lot of interested people.
Mm-hmm. Well, so here's the thing. There's so much work to be done on a individual level, with real live people, right? And then there's so much work to be done on an advocacy level, on the macro level. And it's hard to know. I mean, the welcoming church movement is really an individual kind of thing. A church, takes a step and say, we we have energy around us. We want to, welcome immigrants in. We want to, do something with people. And then there's this sort of abstract, ethereal law thing, legal thing. But that, in my mind is so symbolic and so powerful. What if half of the states in the country, I mean, the ELCA has declared itself a sanctuary denomination, so what if that just sort of leaked out to states? And then what if it leaked out to, taking some of the power away from ICE as an agency? I don't know.
Sounds like some little homework follow-up projects are about trying to follow the money stream. Is there any budget in the ELCA assigned to this? And another would be to check in with the Presbyterian Church and figure out the process for us to take, or a small group of us perhaps, to take something to Grace University Lutheran about becoming a part of these things.
Yeah. Just off the top of your heads, for the people here, do you have any particular, do you gravitate towards one or the other? The sort of, the Amparo welcoming group or the legislative piece? Which sounds more, I don't know, relevant or interesting?
Well, I want to work more at the macro level on strategy, and this is about organizing people and organizing money to create change, which is an Isaiah. We used it in the welcoming church movement for LGBT people.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I wanted to raise, is that you're going to have some cross reactivity possibly on the name, because
Right.
there was and some misunderstandings about what movement are we talking about.
Right,
Not that they're mutually exclusive,
right.
but there is some nomenclature question for me, since having been immersed in that. It was the phrase that was used for the ecumenical effort.
Right.
And I don't know if it's still being used. For instance, there was the Institute for Welcoming Resources, and a whole roster of welcoming churches from across denominations. So that's a question for me. I would be willing to be in touch with Mary Campbell and just have a conversation about, what is the plan? I want to see the plan. And if there is no plan, then we better get making one. That's me.
Figuring out the budget for it.
Yeah. If
I
you
know
don't-
I've talked. I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
Well, if you've got a plan, you've got to have people and money to work the plan. And we can be really have a great vision and mission and a destination in mind for where we want to go, but we have to tend to the nitty-gritty also. Fund it. And it can't be, I mean, it's great to have volunteers. It is really great to have volunteers. And if we have volunteers that are willing to commit themselves full time to do this, that's one thing. On the I'm talking about the macro level now, not the
Mhm.
level.
Right.
And Mary will probably come out and talk with your congregation if you invite her.
Mary
She's been
Campbell?
to- Mary Campbell, she's been to Detroit several times.
Really?
It's
Yeah.
a good idea.
Is she a good speaker?
Yeah, well, so we in my immigration task force, we are participating in the Guardian Angels program as well,
Uh-huh.
which is through Amparo. So did you see that on their website, Janelle?
Yes, yes. And we
Yeah.
have 2 members of the Amparo team that are really, really going to court a lot. Do you want to explain the program, Guardian Angels?
So we haven't been going to court because it's been closed for COVID. We're just now following the court to see if they're back in session. But the Guardian Angel program is just people going to sit in the court for the unaccompanied minors, and in Detroit, that court is on Thursdays. So we just scheduled, always try to have 2 people, hopefully one who speaks Spanish, to go sit with these kids in court and make sure that they know they need to get a lawyer and provide them with resources. We get bilingual and Spanish books for the children and stuff like that. So it's just you'd be surprised how many are going to immigration court without a lawyer. They just don't even know that you don't stand a chance in immigration court without a lawyer. They don't know this. So none of us
And
are
they're-
lawyers, but we can give the advice.
Yeah.
And
Well,
some of them are just little kids who would have no idea about such things.
Right.
You're going to put a 5 or 6-year-old sitting in a court in a language they don't speak and
Yeah,
expect them to know what to do procedurally. It's nuts.
it is. I just
Yeah.
want to mention that one of the 6 of us here is a lawyer. Can anybody guess? No, Wendy, yeah. I when I was in Arizona, we saw these teenagers shackled, hands and feet. And it was just gutting, and they didn't know what was going on, and they were just up there to be sent, back, just to be deported. So, I think, my own personal struggle with this whole movement is which group to get involved in. Say Minnesota becomes a sanctuary state. Is that worth like 3 years of blood, sweat, and tears? It took, I think in Washington State, they said it took 9 years and a dedicated group just pushing and pushing and pushing,
Right. And
who knows what it will be like in Minnesota. Yeah.
But it's also going to take the hands-on kind of walking alongside and helping immigrant individuals and families as they come, which is part of what Amparo was about.
Yeah.
I've had at least one other member of Grace who wants to get engaged in that way and gather some others to help. There's stuff to do. Teach people how to use the buses, for example, or have conversations in English to go alongside whatever else they're getting.
Yeah. So I attend the University Area Sanctuary Coalition, which basically has 2 congregations that are housing people. And basically, other people from other churches are doing things like driving and getting food cards and, picking people up from school. It's like there's a whole movement out there, but it's been called a silent movement, just because of the identities of people involved, especially people who live in church buildings, that needs to be protected. I remember one of my first phone calls to a Lutheran pastor. I was trying to figure out what to do, where to get involved, where to plug in. And I was talking to her on the phone, and she said, I literally can't talk to you on the phone. We have to meet in person because it's too dangerous. I can't talk on the phone. And my eyes were immediately opened. It's like worse than being closeted. It's closeted because you could be deported. Gay people didn't at least have to get deported. So, yeah, it's a silent movement, and it's just, to me, it's just gut-wrenching.
There's a group in the Catholic Church, and I confess I don't know if it's local to Detroit or if it's national or state, but it's called Strangers No Longer.
Mm.
and they are about driving people to appointments and driving people to court. And it's just an email list of people who've indicated they're volunteer, and you'll get an email every so often, so and so needs to go to the doctor, and anybody, and then someone else responds, yeah, I can take off early that day or whatever. So like I said, I don't know if it's just local actually, but it's a lot of churches here that participate.
Hmm.
One thing that we used to do at Grace, and it wasn't immigrants, it was Chinese scholars, is we would meet in the church basement with someone who's non-English speaking and just kind of do conversational English. And it was a regular thing. You could go if you wanted to. It's kind of like Loaves and Fishes, where you came if you wanted to, but a group of people came regularly, and you would just match you up with one or more of these people who are students at the university just to help with English. It's just throwing that out as an idea of something that Grace could probably do at some point. With COVID, I'm not sure when.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a vast array of things we can do. I mean, anywhere from just the, basics to up to the macro level.
Somebody was talking about legal advice. The problem with immigration laws, it changes constantly. And even if you are an immigration lawyer, you have to just still be on top of it every day.
Mhm.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and the problem is how many people in the immigration community can afford lawyers. I mean, the Advocates for Human Rights is doing a great job of getting lawyers. And so that's active and really good system. But, if you aren't lucky enough to get into that system, it's really hard to be able to fund your own legal support team. So I promised you all that we would keep this to an hour, and I love you all. Thank you for coming. I am wondering if I can ask my spouse, the Reverend Hill, to close us in prayer.
Yes, I am willing to.
Hi, Carlos. Sorry, there's Carlos.
You wanna say hi?
Hi.
Hi, Carlos.
Hi, Carlos.
How you doing?
Got his coffee.
All
Good.
right, coffee time.
All right,
Coffee
here's
time,
all the
just-
cups up.
Just in time for closing prayer.
All right,
All right.
let us
I
pray.
didn't think
Loving God, we thank you for the ways you stir our hearts to action. And you put within us the hope of a better world in our country, in our churches, in our denominations. We pray for our state and the legislators who will be working with the bills coming before them. And we thank you for the ways in which people gather in little groups of two or more, Jesus present, to be with us as we consider what we can do. We thank you for each one and ask that we might reach out and bring others on the journey as well. Thank you for life, for hope, for possibility. In the name of our Savior, amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anita.
Welcome.
Thank you all. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Janelle.
Thanks, Janelle, so
Thank
much
you,
for doing that.
Janelle.
Yep.
It was great.
Oh, Ingrid, there you are. I
Yes,
thought Ingrid had left, so you're still.
Joe's here.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
and hi, Richard, too.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah,
Are
I've
the-
been here, yeah.
Yes, are there
Oh, there he
things,
is.
are there things you'd like to say?
No, this was very good. I probably got maybe 2/3 of it, but yeah,
Okay,
All right.
Okay.
Ingrid,
Good.
Ingrid, did you have anything you wanted to contribute?
No, this is very interesting because I've heard about the sanctuary cities, but I didn't know that Minnesota wasn't a sanctuary state. So it was really good to learn about it and all the details. But yeah, also like I've been looking a lot into the advocate of human rights. So it's really good to learn about it and to see who is involved in the development of the state. Yeah.
Good,
Thank you. It was a good presentation.
good, good, good. Thank you for being here. All right.
okay.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Night.
Good night.
Night.